Get you guys not take over the room. Yeah, where we are. I guess the concrete walls don't do the Wi-Fi signal much
Yeah, yeah. Get a little closer
to the modem.
yeah, good.
There we go. That's better. Where do we leave off? Yeah, well, yeah, you've been around a long time doing this. How long you been in fishing?
Well, fishing my whole life,
Yeah.
but I actually kind of got late to the tournament game. I only started getting into bass and tournaments when I was in 98, 99. So I was like 26, 27 years old. I grew up in Quebec,
Okay.
and bass is like the 11th most popular species in Quebec, somewhere down below brook trout and sturgeon.
Okay.
But so it just wasn't really something we targeted a lot growing up. But I fished. I love to fish, and actually, when I moved to Ontario, I started to learn about bass clubs and discovered I was in Ottawa and I found out about the Ottawa Valley South Bassmasters and found out that there was a non-boater program where I could join as a non-boater, get paired up with different boaters, and one get to fish tournaments on different lakes with different people in some awesome bass boats. I was like all in. I was, and I wasn't new to fishing at all. I guided up at Northwestern Ontario. I had a fish and wildlife degree, but I'd never really targeted bass. So that first year was a big eye opener. I showed up with all my spinning gear and 8 pound test, and that was back when a lot of the lakes were still largemouth dominated.
Yeah.
So very quickly, I had to transition to, people were asking me, why don't you have braid? Why don't you have a bait
Yeah.
caster? Why don't you have so? Yeah, it was. I think I did 2 or 3 years as a non-boater before I bought a boat, jumped to the boater side, and I'm very thankful and appreciative of the guys, the boaters I fished with, because I learned a lot from all of them, and kind of got that bug in me and started this lifelong pursuit of always trying to move to the next level, next level, next level.
Yeah. It's that's part of the big reason I started doing some of these podcasts and interviews is that I feel like this generation now is kind of skipping that step that you took and I took and a lot of the other anglers took the opportunity to learn from someone else and get into
Mm,
go that route. I think, and no fault to anybody. I think just technology has made everybody feel a lot more confident to take that
yeah,
step without doing, learning before you jump in the fire with all these guys who are just, seasoned, established anglers. It just seems
yeah,
the big leapfrog now to bypass that crucial stage that you went through
right.
where you learned so much.
Yeah, it was a totally different time, right? We internet was very new, and your information was coming from fishing shows and magazines, and so the learning process was a lot slower. Learning curve is lightning fast now, where you go online, you can find out the best guide, the best technique on the best lake, and learn how to do it instantly. And that's not only fishing; it's playing guitar, playing pool, playing golf, whatever you want to do. The information is right there now.
It's right there. It's so instant. It's available.
Yeah,
Like you're right. Like anytime, any day,
yeah,
realistically. Yeah, it's amazing to watch. I mean, I know that everyone debates whether it's good for the sport or not, but I mean, it's amazing to see how much it's expanded the game, like the whole industry, the whole fishing thing. Like, I mean, everybody's getting into it.
yeah. And the big thing now is forward facing sonar. Is it good?
Yeah.
Is it bad? It's whatever. I honestly have no real opinion, but it's just another step in technology. Like I can think back through the steps I grew up in with, like one when we got mapping, when people got mapping on their boats, and all the old timers. So this would be early 2000s. The old timers were like, you don't know what it's like using a paper chart and cross coordinating
Yeah.
stuff.
Triangulate.
Yeah, triangulate, and then it was side imaging, and then it was better trolling motors, and just everything's making it easier and quicker.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, who knows what's next?
Has it taken the fun out of it for you? No, no, that's a big thing. Like, all the old guys that are complaining about, all the technology, saying how it's not fun anymore. Has it, because you've been around so long doing it and you earn your knowledge at that different pace, has the technology taken the fun out of it for you? It's just, made you,
I don't know if it's taken the fun out of it, there's definitely a change, a shift somewhere. Like uh, you almost instinctively become dependent on it. It's because it's just another source of information. Um, and we have lots of sources of information. We look around, are there birds diving? Which way is the wind going? All sources of information. But now we have this one super source of information that says there's a fish 50 feet over that way. And yeah, I find myself watching it a lot and I like it. And it taking the fun out, I think it's made it to where I expect to be catching more because I think we're all catching more fish because we're seeing more fish or have access to more fish. So if I'm not catching them, I'm not having as much fun because I expect to be catching them. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah, in a bit. So do you find yourself moving more when you're out there? And like I said, when you find a spot where you're not catching them or you're not seeing them on the scope, do you just find
yeah,
yourself now like running, gunning way more than you
yeah,
were before?
yeah. And I remember one of the first times I was in a boat with forward sonar, and I was on one of my home lakes, my favorite lakes. We were on Big Rita, and I got to go to like my best spots, stuff that I had super confidence in. And we put down the trolling motor and scan around and didn't see a single fish.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, so this has kind of changed the game where without this technology, I would have stayed there for 20 minutes or half an hour looking for a bite. And now I don't even have confidence casting because I don't see a fish. Whereas before that, I would have the confidence fishing
Yeah.
because I would feel there was a fish there. So yeah, well, it's
Yeah, it's a complete game changer because now that investigation process where we used to make a million casts in an area, now you don't even have to make one. Like I said, if you don't see one, just
yeah,
keep moving. It's
yeah.
made everybody very efficient, and that's where everybody became better. It's made everybody way more efficient at
Hmm.
finding them and catching them.
Yeah, and there's some people are upset, some people are happy. I'm indifferent. I think it's just tool, another tool. Sorry, my dog's whining here. Another tool, uh, but this one's like a super tool. Like I go back when side imaging came out. I was one of the like I really got into side imaging very early, and it increased my performance. Like there was a definite uptick in the fish I weighed in and how I finished the tournaments because I was getting more information than everyone else because I was becoming proficient with my side imaging. So it's just something else, and I don't know what's next. I don't know where.
Do we dare ask? I mean, how much more? Yeah, how much more can they improve on what we've got? I mean, what they've
Yeah,
done is just so incredible. But
yeah, yeah,
never say never, I guess. So
yeah.
you were with the Ottawa Valley South Club. Now, what about like local tournaments? Did you fish any circuits? Like once you got into it, once you became a boater,
I
uh,
got bit by the bug so bad. I remember it was 2001. I actually went to Tennessee to fish. It was the Bassmaster Megabucks tournament as an amateur. They had pro and amateur, boater, non-boater, and it was my kind of my first exposure to professional anglers. And after 3 days of fishing with them, it hit me that now this might have been the right or wrong thought, but the thought was all these guys are just like everybody else. They just have the time, money, and drive to chase it. And I came home from that tournament, and a month later, I bought a boat, and and just I went right from fishing local club stuff, uh, and I jumped and I signed up for the Canadian Open on Lake St. Clair in my 17 and a half foot skeeter, and it was a little too big of a jump. I did,
yeah.
but I just wanted to compete against the best and try my hand at it. And yeah, I think I got my butt whooped there pretty good by the lake and the fishermen.
By the lake, yeah. That lake doesn't have a lot of mercy for smaller boats.
No, 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 no. But from there, I was fishing like I continued in the club stuff. I've been in the OBN stuff for 25 years now. But I was fishing the Chevy Mercury series, which became the CFT, the Canadian Fishing Tour.
Yeah.
Um, and it was probably around '06 where I started kind of doing well. It ties in with the side imaging. I started winning tournaments, placing higher, getting a bit of a bankroll,
Yeah.
and again, pushing to that next level. I had an opportunity to sign up for an FLW tour event as a boater. Now I had moved up in boats. I was running a 21-foot Ranger at the time, and I scrounged together $5,000 American, and I jumped into the deep end. I fished, I think it was 2008, fished an event on Lake Erie, FLW tour, and I knew the water a little bit. I cashed a good check. I held my own against some of my heroes in the sport, and I walked out of there with, I think I finished 35th for like 13,000 or something, which just started the bankroll to do more,
Yeah.
bigger and more,
Absolutely.
constantly chasing. Um, yeah, yeah. And there's been ups and downs. It's the guys in the States are amazing fishermen. It's you're definitely up against like the top caliber of guys, and
Yeah. And you mentioned it earlier. You said that the time and the drive. Okay, yes, the money, absolutely. But is it a lot because they're able to go year round? Like here in Canada, we're very seasonal. Like I mean, we're fishing them, and up until this catch and release season, we're really fishing them post spawn, like really late post spawn to before season, so that we really fish them during the hardest time of the year. And let's face it, they don't really feed a lot once you get into October, November. Like I mean, well, they do, but the largemouth just kind of shut down at that point. I mean, but is it because also they can fish year round? I mean, the states are built sort of in a way where these
I,
guys
I think
have 12 months.
I think there's a couple kind of things, and I think there's a shift from 15 years ago to now. So if I look back 15 years ago, I would say the guys are so much better then because they fish year round. Bass fishing is an ingrained part of the culture down there. Guys grow up with it from birth. It's all around you. It's all over TV. You're fishing year round, and there's no secrets. There's really very few secrets down there. I remember one FLW event I did on Gunnersville. It was the first year I jumped in, kind of full thing, jumped in the tour. It was a February tournament. The water in Gunnersville was 43 degrees. All my Bassmaster magazine experience said, okay, cold water, points, jerk baits, nice and slow. And I spent a day doing that and wasn't very successful. And talked to a buddy, a friend I met on tour, and he said, "Oh, everybody knows you go in the back bays and you throw a rattle trap. The water's 52 degrees. That's where the fish are." And sure enough, that's where there was. And it was just something that was known because that's just what people grew up on,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't have that knowledge. Now, fast forward now, and I think it's the gap from the U.S. anglers to the Canadian anglers is a lot closer together because there's so much more information via the internet, YouTube, like TV shows, everything's out there more than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just felt like the information was, I agree, the access to information, but I just think of guys here that spend so much time only fishing for 6 months, let's say, you never really get to see the full cycle of what a bass could do from
Right.
January to December, right?
Yeah.
We never saw that the behavior of what to do. And but yeah, I mean, definitely the advantage of being able to fish these fish year round.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but how did you feel as a Canadian angler going down there? I think I don't want to say stigma, but I think the perception of Canadian anglers that we're adaptable, we can learn to we are able to go with all the situations. Was there a big stigma about a Canadian guy coming down there on tour and you know being among
Well,
American anglers?
And I think again that's changed in 10 or 15 years. Uh, the Canadians are adaptable.
Mm.
That's kind of a newer thing. When I was going down in 08, 09, I'd have people ask me like, "Oh, how'd you learn to fish? You have bass in Canada?" Just
Doesn't surprise me.
they didn't know. They didn't know.
Yeah.
Um, Now, obviously, there's again the information goes both ways. People understand how great of anglers we have here in Canada and how great our fishery is and how diverse it is, and they can see the guys kind of transitioning. Um, there were so many little things that were new to me the first time I went down. Um, One was reservoir fishing. We go from our natural lakes full of weeds to something like Hartwell or Grand Lake, where there's not a stitch of weed. The lake's 70 miles long, and the bass are almost a different creature because they have different habitats, different feeding habitats. Um, Another big shocker for me was going from fishing 50, 60, 70 boat tournaments in Canada to a 200, 250 boat tournament in the US. And I remember the first one I did on Lake Champlain. First day of practice, I go out. I had, you know, a number of spots I wanted to fish, and every place I wanted to practice had 3 to 6 boats on it. And I was like, oh, well, here's a learning curve. How do you deal with that?
Yeah.
And I learned you just deal with it, just move in. Guys are actually pretty curious about stuff, both in practice and in tournaments. They understand, you know, there's a lot of people and sometimes limited places to catch them.
Yeah.
That was a bit of a shock.
I bet. Let me pick your brain. How did you approach a 4 day? So obviously in Canada, predominantly our 1 or 2 day tournaments here. We don't really do a lot of 3 or 4. It's unheard of basically. But
Yeah,
how did you, through your experiences, how did you approach that strategy where you knew you had to catch them for 4 days versus 1 or 2?
well, I very rarely made the fourth day, so it
Well, you
didn't
did.
matter.
You had some. You had
A
some.
couple of
You did. You did.
them.
You cut yourself short. You did.
Again, it was kind of a learning thing. You know, I started with that mentality that you got to save fish, and you know the great thing about tournament fishing is you build on each experience, right? Something happens in an event, you learn and move forward. And I learned a long time ago. I learned it's all about the decisions you make. That what you decide at that moment, it's the butterfly effect. It could affect everything. And I remember when an event where I transitioned from save fish because that's what was my attitude in multi-day tournaments. You know, I had a target weight. Um, and if I think of Lake Champlain, because Lake Champlain was the first one I did these multi-day events on, I had a target weight that I needed every day to stay up in that kind of top area. So I would get there and kind of back off. And I remember one particular event, and this is a decision that may have cost me $100,000. I'll never know. Um, it was, I think it was our first week of July event. You know, I had, and this was when on Champlain, like 17 pounds a day would be top 10. Now you need 19 pounds a day to be top 10. But it was the first day of that event. Um, I caught some good smallmouth. I slipped into a bay where I had some largemouth, and there was one little log in the water, kind of offshore, and I threw a Senko out at it, and I hooked a fish. It came in, it was like a 4.5 pound largie, and it had 3 others with it. You know, when they're all schooling together, it was so good. So I got that fish in, and you know, my heart's pounding, and I do my calling. And I went and looked, and those other 3 bass went back up to that log. And so I had a decision to make. Well, do I catch those or do I save them for the next day? And I was thinking, you know, I think I could go get a smallmouth to upgrade, save those for the next day. And that's what I did. Needless to say, I went out. I never caught another smallmouth. I never called again. I came back to those fish like 2 hours later. They were gone.
They were gone.
They were gone. I go back to the hotel, and I was rooming beside Jay Ellis at the time, and I was telling him this story, and he said, "Man, one thing I learned," he goes, "when you can catch them, you catch them." He goes, "You never know what's going to happen tomorrow."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay, that's a new kind of thought I have now." So what ended up happening in that tournament is I tied for 10th place after 2 days and lost the tiebreaker. So I finished 11th. Had I finished 10th, they zeroed the weights. And it was a 10 boat 2 day tournament for $100,000. And I missed it by 1 ounce. And I left those fish that would have given me that ounce.
Yeah.
So little decisions that make all the water. And you know, it's the good decisions and the bad decisions. My route to the Classic, I was fortunate enough to make some really good decisions along the way that got me to where I needed to go.
Okay, now let's paint that picture. So 2014, the Obion qualifier was on Big Rio,
Yes, my home body of water.
your home body of water. So that was from there you made Team Ontario, and then it was off to the Connecticut River.
Yes, and I didn't want to go to Connecticut River.
Well, I was hoping if you had some memories of that because Connecticut River is an idle fishery.
Yeah, and I am not a
And
fan of tidal water at all.
well, that's a whole nother animal to consider. You know, with the water moving in and out, it's how did do you have any memories of that event? Like, I mean, how?
Yeah, tons. It
Yeah,
was like I didn't want to go there because it was tidal river. It was small fish, but we went down, and that was when so the Bass Nation. You're part of the Bass Nation, so how you qualified, how you moved up has changed over the years. That particular year, 2015 was the last year where Team Ontario was 12 guys, and the top guy out of the 12 moved forward. Or the top boater of the 12 moved forward is what it was. So I had a mediocre practice. I had a couple places with fish. And the first day of that tournament, I was a boater, and I drew Jamie Hartman as a non-boater. So Jamie Hartman's now an elite series pro.
yeah.
And he qualified on his team as a non-boater just because that's the way their standings worked out. And he told me he had a great practice. He had some spots to fish, and I was like, "Well, let's do it." So we fished like his stuff half the day, little my stuff the second half of the day. I ended up coming with a decent bag, and by decent, I think I had 8 pounds.
I was gonna say like 8 to 10 pounds seems to that fishery
Yeah.
seems to be like 10 pounds is you're doing a Mike Iaconelli scream with 10 pounds.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah.
And you know, day two I went out, and I think day two I only ground up 7 or 8 pounds, and I had one little backwater area with a couple little pieces of milfoil in it, and I was able to really slow down, like probably the slowest fishing I've ever done, and drag this little craw through this milfoil, and you know, pick up these 2 pound largemouth that were just gold. Yeah. And I managed to just barely beat Doug Brownridge to become the Ontario representative to the Bass Nation, to the Nationals.
To the Nationals, and the Nationals was in Louisiana.
Ouachita River.
Ouachita.
Another totally bizarre, different place. But so this were 2015. There's lots of information online, and thankfully there's a lot of history on something like the Ouachita River. So I was able to watch videos, do tons of research, and find the 2 or 3 key areas where people are generally successful. And there it was quite a weird little place. because the river itself was probably end to end. We had about 100 miles we could fish,
Wow.
plus another branch of 22 miles that went up another direction. Um, and there was a few key areas, like tournaments would be one down at the south end, about 50 miles south. Tournaments would be one up an area called the Darbone Bayou. And this is kind of, there's a key spot up the Darbone Bayou is kind of a branch river to Darbone Lake, and there's an over spillway.
Okay.
Yeah, spillway dam, I guess is the
Yeah.
thing. And when the water's coming over the spillway, it's the only fresh moving current in the system, and the fish would stack up right underneath it, and tournaments would be won right there. When I went down to pre-fish it, there was no water coming over that dam. And I talked to locals, and they said there hadn't been water coming over that dam in 4 months. There'd been no rain. So I found a few fish up there that were kind of related to wood and stuff. But most of the fish I found were about 50 miles south of Monroe, Louisiana. And, bass fishing and tournament fishing, yes, it's about the wins, but it's a lot about the experiences. And I remember that morning, day one, driving down. I'm alone in my boat because we were alone. I'm driving 50 miles south of Monroe, going 70 miles an hour, just literally singing to myself out loud because what an amazing opportunity, an amazing experience I was having.
Yeah.
So at that time, I ended up, you only had to beat the other 10 guys in your division. So I ended up after day one, I managed to get a couple good fish, and I had 12 pounds, which historically is amazing weight, but there was one particular section that was pumping out some 14, 15-pound bags. And I think I was about 10th after day one, 12 pounds. Day two, I went out and I basically fished the same stuff. And I was just fishing short, wood on shore, throwing little crankbaits, little spinner baits around. And there was largemouth and spotted bass in there. Day one, I was fortunate enough to get like 4.5-pound largie, which really helped my 12-pound bag.
Yeah.
Day two, I had a 5-fish limit for 6 pounds. And surprisingly, when I weighed that in, when it all said and done after day two, I was in second place in my 10-man bracket.
In your 10-man bracket.
Yeah. So the only guy ahead of me was Paul Mueller, who is also on the Elite Series now.
Well, yeah, and Paul Mueller's no slouch. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, no, and he'd actually won there 2 years earlier. So he had
been a Bass Nation champion himself.
Yeah. So I think he had a 5-pound lead on me, and I'd almost resigned myself that I couldn't catch him. Yeah. I was like, it's not going to happen. Yeah. And so all day two, it rained. It rained all night between day 2 and 3, and it rained all day 3. So I was sitting at the launch day 3, and I was like, I can run back down to where I caught those fish. And, I might get 6 pounds. I might get 10 pounds. I was like, there's only one way that I have an opportunity to do well. I need to smoke a big bag and or have Paul stumble. And the only way I knew from my practice how to do that was to go that big run up the Darbone Bayou. And my thought was, with all the rain, maybe, just maybe, the water's coming over that dam, and those fish are there. So I made the run as like 26 miles of S-bend turns. You're dodging trees and stumps in the water and stuff, and when things are meant to be, they're kind of meant to be. So when I was running up there, there's one particular place you fish, literally one boat, one cast.
Yeah.
And I was following a guy up the river. He was about 200 feet ahead of me, maybe 200 yards ahead of me or something. And I was just following him up the river. And I had marked on my GPS a few places where I would have to stop and idle through because there was a lot of trees in the water. And I guess because of the rain and I was focused on him, I wasn't paying attention. He hit a tree and I saw him hit. So I slowed down. As I slowed down, I hit. So we're both like, I'll go over and check him out. Are you
Yeah.
okay? And so he needed to change his prop. My prop was fine. And so I tried to help him a little bit, and he said, "Don't worry, you go ahead." So he stayed, worked on his prop, and I went up to this spot in the river. The water was coming over the dam, and I sat on the little spot where the only place they were catchable, and I ended up catching about 12 pounds in the pouring rain. It was like 2 hours later. Like I was expecting this guy to show up. And it was like 2 hours later where he finally kind of idled up into the below the dam, and he went and parked on the shore, and he just kind of sat there. And while I was fishing, and I wanted to find out what was going on, if I could help him. It's the Canadian way, right?
Yeah.
Make sure he's
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
So I stopped fishing and I went over, and when he hit that tree, he actually put a hole in his boat.
Oh,
Yeah. So after he had changed his prop, he went to take off, and his boat was full of water. He couldn't get home.
waterlogged. Yeah.
So basically, he idled the rest of the way up the river, and there was a boat ramp there, and they were coming to pick him up. So to say things kind of got to go your way sometime,
Yeah.
had he not hit, he would have got to the spot ahead of me and and I would have had nothing fished.
Yeah.
I still would have fished around,
You
but
still would have fished around it. Yeah. Yeah.
And I have the video of I have great GoPro video of just this tiny little spot, just catching fish on every cast. It was like largemouth, gar, drum, spotted bass, largemouth. It was just crazy how this dirty water had this fresh water coming in, and everything moved into that one spot.
Same idea, crankbaits and spinner baits, moving baits.
I was actually getting most on crankbaits, and the biggest one I actually got on a tube. The bite slowed a little. I said, "Well, I'm going to go old Canadian style and drag a tube down there,"
Right.
And I ended up getting my biggest fish. And I pushed it right to the end because the moments. Fishing's all about the moments for me. And I remember I had like 12 pounds in the box, and I was like, I'm one fish away from the classic. If I can get like this 1 6-pounder, this is going to push me up into the classic. And I pushed the time and pushed the time and pushed the time, and I never got that big fish. I ended up making the run back. I was out of time. As I was running out, all the boats were gone.
Yeah.
And I actually messed up, and I went through a stump field. Like you're supposed to be following a certain route for through. Well, I missed a corner and went through a stump field. And I was like, bah, 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 bah. It's like, oh my goodness. I came off plane, checked the prop, I bent an ear. I was like, well, I gotta go.
You gotta
I gotta go.
Yeah, no turning back now. Yeah.
I went down, and I made the run back, and I got back to, I think I had a couple minutes before check-in, and Paul Mueller came up to me before we'd even checked in.
Yeah.
And he said, "How'd you do?" And I said, "Well, I got like 12 pounds. And he goes, "Congratulations, you won the classic." And I almost threw up. I was like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "I got like 5 pounds." He goes, I did not catch him. And I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it.
I bet. No, I'm getting goosebumps for you. That's incredible.
Yeah. So we waited, and I got that classic spot. The Evinrude service crews were there. They fixed up my prop for me. So that was all good. And I got to go to the classic and represent Ontario and represent Canada.
Absolutely. So that was the Wachita River was November of 2015.
November 2015, and the class. So it would have been first week of November 4th, say. The classic was May 1st or March 1st.
It was the March of 2016, and that was on Grand Lake, correct?
Yeah.
Grand Lake in Oklahoma.
Yeah. So Grand Lake went off limits January 1st. So I had, if I wanted to pre-practice, I had 6 weeks to get down there for pre-practice. And I did. Huge thanks to, I'll take this moment to give a shout out to the Ontario Bass Nation, because, Grassroots, it's anglers supporting anglers.
Yeah,
And,
that's right.
the fundraising, the financial support, the emotional support from everybody was amazing, because it probably cost me $7,000 or $8,000 to fish the nationals, and maybe another $7,000 or $8,000 to fish the classic.
Yeah.
And there was tons of fundraising and support from all the clubs, and we did raffles and donated days fishing and stuff. It was amazing. So I went down for a week of pre-practice with my Canadian partner Nigel Toohey, and we got to experience Grand Lake in December. Grand Lake's a tough fishery sometimes. Like it's a big fishery. It's a river fishery. And we had a poor practice. The interesting thing, and again, it's something that we don't deal with in Canada, is so I had my week of practice. I marked a few spots, learned a bunch of stuff, came home. When I came home, the area got a foot of rain in like a week, and Grand Lake rose 15 feet.
Wow.
So, and all this like mud and trees and everything came down to the point where the lake was still dirty when we got back there in March. Like it just totally changed the fishery. And that's one of the things that these reservoirs deal with. But yeah, went back in March, had, getting great support from Canada. I had 15, 20, 25 people come down, kind of follow me down there. And again, so many little moments throughout the week, throughout the classic week that come to mind. One of my favorite ones was on media day. So the day before the classic is a media day. Everybody brings their boats in. Oh, there we go. We spilled some water. That'll be okay. Everybody brings their boats in, and all the media's there. And a carload of guys had driven 24 hours from Canada and showed up there on media day the morning, like while we were all getting set up. My buddy texted me and said, well, come on in here. Like it showed the doors don't open for a while. And they were like my own personal pit crew, helping me wash my boat. And yeah, that was kind of a neat moment.
And the classic is, I mean, it's the fishing, but it's the show too. I mean, they make it just like, they make it the Super Bowl. So so you went through all that to qualify to get to the classic, which took its own toll. But now you're getting to the classic, and how was it dealing with everything but the fishing? So let's take the fishing out of it, because obviously that brings its own pressure. But now you've got to deal with media day and all the craziness that goes on with being at the classic. How was that?
Yeah, I was told it's an overwhelming thing. Shout out to Dave Mercer. He was a great sounding board, source of information, just to help me prep for the experience. He said, look, you're going to get overwhelmed. Just try not to get too overwhelmed and focus on the fishing. And, again, different world with regards to anglers. When I showed up down there during pre-practice to get my fishing license, I walked into this tackle store and went in to get my fishing license. And, when I told the guy, yeah, I'm from Canada here in December to pre-practice for the classic, I was like a hero. He was like calling people to come down to the tackle store and meet me and autograph shirts and stuff. Like, I'm just a dude from Canada fishing. But that the Bassmaster Classic just has such that prestige about it. Hang on one second, I'm just gonna let this
Yep,
dog.
no problem.
Sorry about that. Well, I don't know how much time we have, but I have all these little stories.
You got this, and I'm on your time. Like I said, I'm on your time. You got.
I just want to share them. So I had experienced something, I call it bass brain, and just these silly little mistakes that I made on the way. And I think it was just from being so overwhelmed of everything that was going on, all the planning I had to do. And that first day in December, when I showed up for pre-practice, and I pulled up to that tackle store, went in, I was probably in the tackle store for an hour.
Yeah.
And I came out, and as I came out, I went to remote start my truck, and I didn't hear the beep beep or anything to start my truck. And as I approached it, I realized the truck was still running. So I'd left the truck running for the hour that I was in the store. And when I got in the truck was in drive. So I pulled up in front of this tackle store, and I was on just a slight little incline. So the truck and boat never moved, but it sat there in drive for an hour. It just bass brain. And when we left to come home from that trip, I drove 7 hours through Missouri and Arkansas with my boat not tied down. I had the back straps on, but not the front strap.
Not the front.
And it wasn't until I got to my first stop, my first hotel, I was like, oh my God, I've bass brain. I'm just forgetting everything.
Thinking about everything else, but the little thing.
Yeah. But the events surrounding the Classic were really kind of the memory. Like, yes, the fishing is the memory too. And having the Canadians there, and Mark Hunter and Cooper were on the water watching me on day one or day two. I mean, that was just an amazing memory. I wanted to experience it all, so any little thing I could participate in, I did.
Yeah.
And on one day they go to like a sick kids hospital, all the anglers. And that was such a memory for me. Just again, seeing how much these not only the children, but the parents kind of idolize the anglers and treat them as rock stars and stuff. And that's when I had my own little personal Kevin Van Dam experience.
Yeah.
So we get to the hospital, and we're setting up kind of this autograph area because people are coming in to get magazines and shirts signed and stuff. And I didn't bring a Sharpie. And I'm looking around, I'm asking people, and hey, you got a pen, got a Sharpie, got a Sharpie? And Kevin goes, hey, rookie. He goes, here. And he hands me a pen. Thank you, Mr. Van Dam.
Thank you.
So it was kind of a funny thing. Throughout the day, every time we kind of saw each other, he's like, how's that pen working out? It's perfect. It's awesome. Thanks. And then later that evening, we were out for dinner. I was out with the other Bass Nation guys. Because you really got to, like, there were 6 of us from the Bass Nation that made the Classic. So we were kind of a really tight little group, and we had dinner together and shared practice thoughts and stuff. But Kevin was over at another table with his wife, and I called the barmaid over, bartender. And I said, I need like a white napkin. She gave me a white napkin. I wrote on it, I said, thanks for the pen. It's Charles Sim. I signed it. I gave it to her. I said, bring this to that guy and bring him a drink. So we shared a little thing there. That was kind of fun.
That's neat.
Yeah. But Kevin gave me some great advice too, because um, I was telling him how I was really struggling on the water, and I said, yeah, I was talking to other anglers, and other anglers are struggling too, and he said, be careful, these guys are wolves. They're out to get you. You may not be getting the most honest information from people. I was like, okay, I understand. I understand. Thank you.
Water cooler talks for the water cooler, right? Yeah,
That's right. Yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
yeah. I'm sure that happens a lot. Now,
Hmm.
so what about now that we're on that little bit subject? When you're hanging out with the other nation members or on tour when you've done FLW, and when you share information with people there, with the other anglers there, is it more of kind of like what the fish are doing? Are you sharing spots? Are you talking about what what goes on in that whole exchange of information between other anglers when you're at a tournament? Because
I
obviously
think
you're
there,
not fishing for first place. I mean, it's kind of tough to.
yeah, yeah. I think I learned, I probably didn't learn quick enough, but that people really keep to their own little groups, their own little cliques.
Yeah.
And there's different levels of, you know, friendships, circles, your inner circle, your outer circle. And so I ended up developing a couple friends where we share information, but really not everything, because it's a business, right? Everyone's trying to make their living. And yeah, not everyone's out to, everyone's, how do I phrase this? A lot of people are out for themselves, which is it's justifiable because it's an individual sport. And but those few times where there's a couple of people I developed close relationships with where I could share information and kind of trust the information that they were sharing with me. And you're starting to see now how important that success is of guys working as a team. You look at Chris and Corey,
Yeah.
you know, they share everything, and it's good for them. You took it, Drew Benton and Drew Cook. Is it Drew Benton, Drew Cook? They kind of work together. They have a great video series, um, and they share everything. And I guess you look at the saying, you know, a rising tide floats all ships. So if you're helping each other, it's everyone's successful. Yeah.
So now let's go back to the classic. So day one, how was day one?
Uh, Day one, I think day one I only weighed two fish. I mean, it was a tough fish. It was tough fishing. Um, and you know, in retrospect, this is the event where on day three, Edwin Evers weighed 29
Had,
pounds,
had that big monster bag, yeah.
had that big monster bag. Um, so I started my classic about 150 yards from where he caught that 29 pounds. He was just up a river on a flat, and local boy, local knowledge. I mean,
Yeah, one
he
brush. I think it
knew
was
that
one brush pile, wasn't that? Like it was basically working around one brush pile. I think it was.
it was actually, so it was a river coming in, and it was kind of where the first spot where it started to get a little deep. So the river area was probably 4 or 5 feet deep. And there were giant trees, like entire trees that had been washed down. And there were washouts in the root systems, all these trees. And he was just going from each little root system to root system, picking out these big fish that had set up in there. And yeah, it was amazing. So I fished, you know, I concentrated mostly on, it was a pre-spawn event. So I was doing a lot of crank baiting, some jerk baiting, bluff walls. And I think day one, I might have had two fish, maybe three. Um, or late in the day, I hooked a fish, and it was a big fish. It was pulling. I was all excited. And my observer, my marshal, he was got the camera out. He was ready to film and stuff. And I was like, oh, this is the one. This is the one. I get it up, and it was a sucker snagged in the butt. I was like, how do you do that on a crankbait? Yeah. So yeah, I think I ended up day one, you know, way down and standing somewhere. I think we were 55 guys, so I was probably like 48 or 40 or something like that. Um, Day two started out with a bang. Day two started out like gangbusters. I got on one little area and very quickly caught, three good fish, including two that were like 3 and 4 pounds. And I'd actually jumped into, so on Bass Live, it's updating all the weights and stuff. I'd actually jumped into the top 10 just for a brief moment. um, and unfortunately, I couldn't finish the limit. I ended up with 4 fish for probably 12 pounds. I missed the day three cut by about a pound. I ended up, I want to say 34th.
Oh.
I think 34th, they took 25 or something. So, that's it. The classic was done. But I still got to do the experiences. Like when we pulled out of the water day two, even though we were 90 miles from Tulsa where the weigh-in was happening,
Yeah.
there was a crowd of people waiting there for pictures and autographs. And, I got to meet some awesome kids and, show my fish to these people just loving the event. Had my friend come and RJ come, and he did the drive back. He was up there being a media observer. So he actually drove me back to the weigh-in on day two. And so it was good to have a friend in the truck to help me unwind.
Yeah.
And yeah, great chat with Mercer on stage. It was awesome to, look in the crowd and see the Canadian flags out there. And I got off the stage and Dave told me, and Mercer told me, he goes, one thing everyone has when they go to Classic is they get off the stage and they just want to get back. And he was right. The very next day, I was like, how can I do this all again?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, when it was all said and done, I remember driving home, it was a little anticlimactical because I'd been months working up to this, like planning and organizing everything. And then it was done. It was like,
now
okay,
what?
24-hour drive back to life.
And that's something different. I mean, speak to that a little bit if you can, because a lot of the guys who are like myself, part in Bass Nation or haven't made it to that level, speak to that part a little bit, the psychology of it. Like, how much of that psychology, the internal psychology of your own, play into not just your fishing, but like how you approach dealing with an event over so many days, not just the classic, but you fished the other tour.
Yeah.
That's something that most of us don't get to experience because it's just not on that level, where we're, at the club level. But speak that a little bit to everyone who's going to watch this video. Like, that's a big component of what these guys do, what you did. It's something that gets overlooked, I think, a lot when people talk.
And I don't think I'm like, I think you're talking about like confidence.
Confident in a pro, like, I mean, because you do have to psych yourself up. Like you said, you spent months psyching yourself up to get to the event.
I personally, and I've always had an issue with my own kind of mental state. I get very high and very low when it comes to my fishing, and when I'm not doing well, it's a very kind of dark place for me, and I struggle to kind of, how do I move this forward? How do I get my feet out of the mud and start catching them? And conversely, when I look at kind of when I've had successful runs, like a few events in a row where I'm doing well, that confidence is there, and you learn to trust your instincts, and you kind of fish by your gut, and having that confidence in yourself helps you succeed. And I always, when I start to go down that dark place, I try to remind myself that no, you can do this. This is just a little stumbling block. You've got to get over. You got to figure it out. You got to find the next key. Figure out where the fish have transitioned to, what the next move is, and yeah, I mean, I think in any kind of athletic sport, there's that kind of confidence thing. You got to believe in yourself and have that drive to succeed.
Always thought like you see the guys who are successful or even hyper successful, and they just it seems like they walk around 24/7 believing that they're just the best in the world. I mean,
Yep.
it never leaves their mind. That mindset is always with them, no matter what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
It seems they carry that with them continuously
Yeah,
throughout anything they do.
yeah, and it's not only the confidence, but it's like that a killer instinct,
Yeah.
maybe that.
Yep.
Um,
Absolutely.
and I haven't experienced a story that shows me that I kind of lack that little killer instinct. Um, so there was an event. It was a 1 day BFL in St. Lawrence, and it was the Smallies were spawning, and so I'd gone out. It's the BFLs are a 1 day boater non-boater event. Great, fantastic experience. If there's any non-boaters out there looking to try kind of just a little higher level experience, the BFLs and in Ontario are closest ones. There's some in Michigan, some in New York. They're great. So I was on the St. Lawrence, kind of my home body of water, and we were bed fishing. And I remember I ran out. I had a great morning. By 9 o'clock, I had 25 pounds in the boat. And I was idling out of a bay. And I was thinking, okay, what's my next move? Because I have no more big fish around. I'm like, well, I know I have 2 or 3 fish 90 miles away that will help
Yeah.
me. I was like, I could make that run and maybe get those fish that'll help me. But if I do that, my non-boater is going to zero. I'm risking breaking down. I'm going to burn $350 in gas.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of risks there. And I was like, I don't think I can do it. I don't think it's not a good idea. So I had made the decision. I told my non-boater who had zero fish at the time, I said, look, I'm going to take you around to all my 4 pound fish that I don't need. And I'll teach you how to bed fish and you can catch them and you'll do okay. Now, in retrospect, I probably could have just started fishing new water, looking for 1 or 2 big fish close.
No.
But I took that gentleman around. He ended up catching, I had 25 pounds. He had 21 pounds. And he won the co-angler side. I finished third in that event.
Yeah.
So I had 25 pounds for third. Jamie Hartman had 25 and a quarter for second. And Corey Johnston had 25 and 3/4
Oh, geez.
for first.
Less than a pound.
Less than a pound. And it was probably about a $4,000 paycheck difference with the bonuses and stuff. And I was like, that, because I mean, we all know Corey has the killer instinct.
Yeah.
He stops at nothing.
Yep.
And I was like, wow, if I had that killer instinct, maybe I could have. So I'm always chasing that. I'm always battling that kind of my nice guy versus my go it all out.
Yeah. And I mean, it's refreshing to hear you because that's also something that doesn't get talked about a lot either. And I think a lot of guys who will watch this who will experience that will hopefully will understand that that's just a big part of the game. And even when you talked about, like, I mean, getting your prop fix, like, I mean, how much planning did you do? You're doing these long hauls, 20 hours, 24 hours. Like, how much planning did you do as far as spare equipment goes? Like, how much that went into that? And again, this is something that, I mean, I know it's a little part of the thing, but obviously for us up here in Canada who are trying to make it, you have to take it into consideration. God forbid you break down. Like, God forbid problem.
Yeah, and you kind of learn to. I'm never afraid to ask for help. Like, life is hard, stuff happens, and you get breakdowns. You people will help you, and I've had marinas help me out. I've had marinas rush me in to get work done. As for pre-planning and stuff, some trips I did tons. one of the first years I fished the Ever Start series, it's going back many, many years, I was pretty new and pretty diligent about stuff. And I had a spare trolling motor, I had spare graphs, I had tackle up the yin yang, I knew where all the local marinas were. The longer I was in the game, I didn't prep as much. Um, Going back to that Ouachita River event, I was fortunate enough to benefit from the experience of Doug Brown because he had fished there before a couple years earlier. And when he did it, talk about being prepared, he actually had a spare lower unit in
Yeah,
his boat.
remember. Yeah, I remember.
In his boat.
Yeah.
And I just didn't have access to or the knowledge to change the lower unit, but so I never went quite that far. But lots of planning of hotels and where you're going to stay and where you're next, down the road where you're going. And you think you prepare for tackle wise, like every event, my boat's full, my truck's full. Every single event I've ever fished south of the border and many north of the border, I'm ordering $100 worth of tackle.
You're ordering something. It's always like something.
2 days before the tournament.
Yeah.
Like you never have the right thing.
Yeah. Never enough tackle. Just keeps on building. So the classic is over. Sorry, go ahead.
Just you talk about how prepping for the event. It's definitely the amount of effort I do has kind of declined as I've gotten older. Like I remember my first few years as a non-boater in the Bass Club. Like the night before the tournament, all my rods are done. My clothes are laid out. My wallet's laid out. Everything's where it needs to be. Fast forward 25 years and sometimes I'm just not even retying lines for practice anyways, but the amount of prep you do definitely declines a little bit for me anyways.
Or you just became more efficient at it. I know, like I said, when we're younger, we
become more efficient. Maybe you realize that all the prep really isn't necessary. You start become more efficient.
Yeah.
Like I think back to my early days, I would carry two boxes with 30 different colors of tubes. Now I carry 3 because you don't need them all.
You don't need them all. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? You became better at it. So now the classic is over. You're back, and you kind of kept it rolling because you got on the FLW tour right after pretty well, right? Like full time.
Yeah,
2018 was it?
Yeah. So there's my fishing, the drive I have has gone up and down over the years. So I actually fished the full FLW tour in 2009.
Yeah.
In 2011. And then I kind of fizzled out. I was like, okay, I've tried it. I'm kind of done chasing the dream. And then I fished the classic and I got a taste for it all again. And so I came home from that. I kind of started lining things up, organizing to kind of make another run. And in 2018, I fished the Everstar series and qualified for the FLW tour. And I jumped right into the FLW tour. And I actually had great support that year, a couple of years there from American Bait Works. And for a couple of years, it was awesome. It was awesome. That first year, 2019, it's looking back, it's amazing how one fish over an entire season can make or break things, or even in a tournament.
Yeah.
Like 2009 on the FLW tour, I was one fish away from making the championship over 6 events. One more 3-pounder.
Yeah.
Turns into an extra $20,000 or more. And the same thing in 2019. I had a couple great events. That first event on Sam Rayburn,
You finished 10th. That was we were talking here. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, and it, it was the classic experience of terrible practice, excellent tournament.
Excellent tournament.
So we got down to Rayburn, and it was the first time I've ever been to Rayburn, and the lake was 10 feet high, and it was January, first week of February, maybe late January, and in 3 days of practice, I had 4 bites, and I was just, like I was like, oh my God, what am I doing here? You talk about that dark place, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my, this is crazy, and I can't do this, I can't figure this out. Um, and then it slides into the decision process. So I sit down and think, come tournament day, okay, what am I going to do? In 4 days, in 3 days, I had 4 bites. 2 of those bites came on back-to-back casts in one little cut. I said, well, that's where I have to start. So I ran there, I started there, and I ended up fishing within a 100-yard stretch of shoreline for 4 days. Just the fish happened to be just stacked up there.
Stocked up. Yeah.
Stacked up. I made the same cast for just about 4 days. And all that came from 2 bites in practice.
There you go. So you had Sam Rayburn, and that same year you had a 18th place on Champlain. So that year was pretty special for you. It was a good year for you.
Yeah, it was good, and I thought it was going to be great because we went from Sam Rayburn and we went to 2 Florida events, back-to-back Florida events, and I cashed in both of those. And so 3 events into the 7-event season, I think I was like 10th in the standings in the Angler of the Year points. So I was like, okay, this is good. This is good. Things are looking good. And then I fumbled the next 2. I had terrible performances, like finished in the bottom of the field. Kind of managed to save it in the last one on Champlain, but still ended up missing the championship by, I think, 19 points or something, which is essentially one fish.
Essentially, one of those events that you said you did poorly on. If it was just a little bit better.
Yeah, one of those. Yeah.
But that level of competition, that again, same thing. When you get there, you realize that it's how hard it is to maintain consistency. Tournament in every tournament as you go, because now you're fishing as 200 other guys. Like
and it's diverse fisheries, right? You're going from we went from Rayburn, which was 10 feet high pre-spawn, to Florida, which was very similar to fishing largemouth here, where there's lots of shallow vegetation and stuff. To what else was on that year? There was some like deep rocky impoundments where there's no weeds and the fish are all kind of offshore on ledges and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's really neat because the diversity of the schedule really allows the guys that know it what they're doing to rise to the top.
And that kind of plays like we were talking before, like the psychology of it, because you're going from one fishery to another. You're constantly doing it up and down, up and down. You're going to an event that you feel good at, and you're going to an event that maybe not plays into your strengths or how you fit, and you got to force yourself to fish a certain way that you may not be comfortable with.
And at the same time, dealing with kind of non-fishing things, like I was taking time off work to go do these events, so I'd have to turn around, rush home, work for 2 or 3 weeks, and then rush back. Yeah, it's just life.
Yeah, well, I think Danny McGarry does that, I think, as well. Like he's doing the EQ and he's going down there and then he's coming back to work. And I mean, that's another level of commitment that you have, and he's got. Like, again, that's just all part of the experience. They're saying, like, I mean, that's part of it until you get to the point where you can just focus on the fishing.
Right. Yeah, I love watching Danny, Coops, Johnstons, Gussie. I love watching them do it because I've done it or been close to doing it, so I know what they're going through. And to see them succeed just makes me appreciate even more how well everybody's doing down
So seeing, because the Classic was just on Grand Lake, was it not this year?
Yeah.
Yeah. So seeing how the guys fished Grand Lake now, and let's take into account, okay, you didn't have FFS back then. You didn't. What would you have done different? Let's say you were kind of like, okay, now now you've been there, you fished it, and you see now how these guys approached it. How did
Um,
it all like translate to you, like when you thought about your time there during the
I mean,
2016 Classic?
what's amazing about the time of year, so a lot of the events in the US, they kind of follow that pre-spawn to spawn transition. And it's amazing how much 1 week will make a difference. Like this year's Classic was probably about 3 weeks ahead of when we were there last year. So their fish were a lot shallower. Uh, they were a lot more kind of closer to the spawn. Also, I believe the lake was a lot clearer. But forward facing sonar just gives everybody all that much more information on how to succeed on what
They
you're
were
doing.
they were
You're
calling.
not wasting time
That's
fishing
right. Yeah,
areas where there's no fish.
that's right.
I think back to, if I go back to that one little stretch where I caught 3 or 4 fish, had I had forward facing sonar and maybe there was 10 other fish there that I could have picked off, it totally changes the game, changes the performance. Yeah.
Experience.
Yeah, it was great, and it was good when Cooper. So I mentioned how Cooper and Mark Hunter were out on the water the second day of the Classic, and I remember my marshal, as I was fishing away, he was like, "Oh, there's a boat there with a Canadian flag." And I turned around and was like, I got a picture of it somewhere. I took a picture of the Canadian flag.
Awesome.
That was really cool. So when Coop made the Classic on his first Classic on Knoxville, um, it worked out that I was going to have my boat down there. So I kind of got to return the favor, go on the water. I was watching Coop fish his Classic. That was really awesome.
Yeah. But let me toot your horn a little bit, because you're the first Canadian to make it to the Classic through Bass Nation. So no one did it before you. No one's done it since.
Right.
And you were the first Canadian since Hank Gibson to get to the Classic.
Yeah. So Hank was the first in '91. Then I did it through the nation in 2016. And then all the rest of those guys, whatever. But no, it's great. Like we've now got Chris, Corey, Gussie with his Classic Championship, Cooper, Danny. Evan's going to be on
Evan
the
is
elite
leading Angler of the Year in the EQs.
Yeah, I was actually at a Barry Bass meeting Tuesday night, 2 nights ago, where Evan was speaking, and it was, he's just over the moon with his success, and so are we. And watching Evan's success and watching Danny's success, it's kind of lighting my fire again. Like, so the last year I fished the FLW Tour would be 2022, and I only did part season. I just financially I wasn't where I needed to be, mentally I wasn't where I needed to be, and I was like, okay, so I'm done now. I've done this kind of experience, and now 3 years later, it's kind of getting the fire going. So there's a little part of me that's really looking forward to next year's Opens schedule.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. There. But I'm still doing the Bass Nation stuff, and it's a little different qualifying through the Bass Nation now. They transitioned it from, going from the provincial to the divisional.
They skipped a step. Yeah, they took out a step. Yeah.
So the nationals, where it was 50 boats when I went, is now going to be a 250 boat tournament.
250 boat. Yeah. But did the fire really go out? I mean, I know you said you'll fish a bit, then you'll stop, and you have that lull period. But I don't think that the fire never really goes out, right?
The fire never goes out. The fire,
It's still,
Uh,
it never goes away.
I mean, it's we fish all summer, right? You're the same. We fish all summer. By like mid-September, I start getting done. I'm done. I've had enough. I don't want to fish. I don't want to think about fishing. People ask me to do tournaments. I'm like, tired. I have no money.
Yeah,
I'm broke.
yeah,
And then, November goes, December goes, the schedules start coming out. You start planning. I go from thinking, next year I'm going to cut back a little bit to by January, I have my entire summer planned.
right.
And I'm doing 27 tournaments across Ontario and Quebec and into New York a little bit this year. So yeah, I guess the fire never goes out and just kind of declines a little bit.
I was the same way. I kind of September hits in October and you're kind of burnt out. And then I want to say 2 years ago, I got bit by the November bug on Lake Simcoe and Lake Erie. And
Yeah,
I fished more in the fall last year than I did over the summer.
yeah,
I took full advantage of that feed that they do before the winter. And yeah,
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 yeah. That fall fishing's phenomenal. It's we mentioned I moved up to Wasaga Beach from Ottawa a while ago, and I'm still. It's like a mental block where I'm like afraid of November Simcoe. Like I know there's giants out there,
there is.
but
You just gotta risk those 5, 6 foot waves.
yeah.
You gotta you just gotta put up with them and
But
go out there.
Simcoe's never a lot of fish, right? Like you're
No,
never getting.
no, you're never gonna have those 20, 30, but those 5, 6 that you're gonna get are all
Yeah,
big
yeah,
ones. Yeah.
yeah,
Erie's the more numbers game where you can go out the Erie
yeah.
and you'll catch 30, 40, 50 fish in a day.
Yeah. For me, fishing, a lot of fishing is that moment where you realize you have a bite, where you trick the fish
Yeah.
and you set the hook, and then okay, just get in, get it off. Let's get another bite.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy the many fish day. Like we had a day of pike fishing earlier this week, me and my stepson Matthew, and we got 25 pike in 3 hours. I got 140 incher. It was amazing.
That's
And I
fun.
think that's why I like crappie fishing so much because you're just constantly like the float's just constantly
Oh, yeah.
dropping the float.
Yeah. So what are you fishing in Ontario this year?
Um, so I'm I still keep going back to the east end of Ontario.
Okay.
So the Renegade series kind of ended and
Yeah.
was reborn as the Bait Fuel Tour.
Field tour.
So I'm fishing the Bait Fuel Tour, which is it's all along the 401 corridor. We have one largemouth event on Quinte, and then there's two events on the St. Lawrence, two on Lake St. Francis. So those are mostly smallly dominated. The Thousand Island Open. It's an amazing tournament. That's out of Kingston. I'm going to do the Canadian Open on Simcoe this year. I'm also doing the Huron Bass Tour,
Yep.
which
Yep.
Georgian Bay has just become a phenomenal smallmouth fishery. So it's you look at the results last year. You needed 24 pounds to win every single tournament. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And we did an event in the fall. Me and Tom Hardy, and we had 26 and a quarter or something for a second. Like the smallies are just huge everywhere, right?
They are. When they feed so much longer. I think part of it just they feed well into
Yeah,
November and they just get a chance to grow that big.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And there's more of them. And you doing are you gonna do the Hank Gibson qualifier this year in Temiskaming?
Unfortunately, I'm not. I was really looking forward to fishing that lake because a new body of water, something
Yeah.
different to learn. But our season's so short; there's just always conflicts, and unfortunately, there's a conflict that I can't miss. So, no Hank Gibson qualifier for me next year. Hopefully next. Hope no qualifier this year. Hopefully next year. But with the new format, there's an opportunity to fish the regionals to
Well,
still make the nationals.
did you look? Did you look? Because I believe Danny fished one, and
Danny made it.
Danny
Yeah,
made it. Yeah.
yeah. I would have fished Champlain, but again, I have a conflict. I considered going to Minnesota, but I thought that was just a little bit too much, a little too far. Um, but yeah, maybe next year. Maybe next year. Yourself, are you going up there?
Yeah, I'm going up. I actually have this will be my first one. Uh,
Really?
Yeah, this will be my. I've been in the club scene a long time, but I got my boat only 3 years ago.
Oh, okay, okay.
So I've been treading the water slowly. I've
Yeah,
not really kind of pushed the envelope, but
yeah,
last year I started doing more, and this year, I was talking with my wife, and we got 2 young kids, so we're just kind of planning things out, and they're like, you know what, let's give it a shot. Let's at least do that, and keep it honest. So
yeah,
yeah, I'll be heading up there. I've only ever fished that lake for walleye. I fished that lake multiple times
yeah.
on our hunting trips, but only ever for walleye. I've never ever targeted smallmouth in
Yeah,
Temiskaming. That'll be interesting to
that's cool. I
experience.
think I've done, I want to say I've done 15 or 16 qualifiers over the years. Just the first one, I was like a non-boater on
Yeah,
Muskoka Lake. It's, and for me, the qualifier is just a great way to kind of bond with other club members in the Bass Nation. And I think back to the classic and the camaraderie and the following from and the support from all the Bass Nation. Like it really kind of cemented the brotherhood that that the club guys are.
absolutely. And that's one of the things I'm trying to promote, is like trying to make new anglers, and some of the guys have been realize that it's really is like a family. Like it really,
Yeah,
everyone comes together and support, and
yeah,
that's what it's about really at the end of the day. Is that, like I said, the tides will lift all the boats up. Like, I mean, you're
yeah,
there for everybody, and it
yeah.
all.
And it's not just like the fishing, right? It's kind of the social aspect. It's the like we did a little garbage pickup last week. That was great. And when I actually kind of stepped up and I was fishing the FLW tour, I had people kind of question why I was still fishing club events. And it it is because of that that bond, that friendship of the club guys, as well as I started as a non-boater in a club,
Yeah,
and guys taught me stuff, and to have the opportunity to teach new people or get other non-boaters on the water and to have the same experience and potential advancement that I had, that means a lot to me. So
yeah,
yeah, I try to be involved in that all the time.
yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head there. I mean, that's what it's about, and I think we try to, like, offline about it. I said that I think BSS is doing very well. I think, and partially maybe because the other organization is not doing too well at the moment, but I think the club scene for OBN anyways has been stronger than it's ever been, it seems. I think
Mhm.
all the clubs have a lot of members and everyone's participating, and
Yeah,
uh
yeah,
seems very
and
good.
and that and that's very cyclical. Like when I joined the Ottawa Club in '99, we were 40 members, got up to 50 members, 60 members, and then it kind of declined right down to almost closing with like 6 or 7 members. And over the years, it's kind of back up to like 50 members, and
Yeah,
and I agree with you. Like there's more people fishing now, and more people see the opportunity. The Barrie Bassmaster Club is 71 members now. It's and uh, I don't know if it's still true, but the Ontario Bass Nation was at one time the biggest nation member wise out of all the
it
nations.
probably is close too. Like I say, I think you're right. I mean, it probably is close to being
Yeah,
number one. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. And
yeah.
being a part of a club that just has good anglers, also, I mean, like, you have the experience of teaching a non-boater or someone else to catch a fish, but there is that competition against the other guys, and
Oh, for sure.
it makes you so much better. It makes you better in the
Sure.
long run. I mean, like, you're
Yeah,
going out there on your, like, a Wednesday nighter or a club on the weekend, and you're fishing against some of the guys in the club who are great fishermen, and it just kind of it pushes you,
right. Yeah,
makes
yeah.
you better.
Um, yeah, and some of my closest friends I met through the club, uh, and You're fishing for a couple $100. You're not breaking the bank or anything, but
Yeah,
that kind of bragging rights is kind of fun too. The little side
absolutely.
bets are good.
Yeah. So to close this off a little bit, so any plans for 2025? Are you looking at 2025, 2026? Are you looking to maybe jump back in and do something more down south?
Yeah, Yeah, a little bit. And I kind of waver. I flip flop
Yeah.
every week or so. Uh, right now, yeah, I want to see that open schedule. I heard there might be some changes in the format, so I want to see what that's all about. But potentially, I might go and be the old guy on the Opens tour. Um, I'm actually on the wait list for so the FLW tour, which transitioned to the Tackle Warehouse Invitationals. Um, you're now able to, you don't have to fish the whole tour to get in on those. So I'm actually on the waiting list for the Lake Champlain event, which is June 15th.
Yeah.
So I'm excited if I get into that. That's a big nationally televised event, and
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
might be a little springboard back into kind of maybe the Opens next year.
Yeah.
So,
Right
yeah,
on.
we'll see. We'll
No.
see.
And hopefully we'll see you at the qualifier next year, at the OBN qualifier.
Yeah, oh yeah. If I can make it, I'm there, right?
Yeah. Well, I heard that Temiskaming Shores already opened their doors again. They said if the OBN wanted to come back next year,
Yeah,
that they would welcome them back next year.
make it a regular event. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
make it another back to back. So it's possible that it could go back up there next year again
Yeah,
if the location is not chosen.
yeah, yeah. We have so many Great Lakes around them. So many awesome places. It's just finding the venues to host us, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's you see the difference in that down in the U.S. Like the cities fight for tournaments to come there, and they want the big tournaments, and yeah, we just don't quite have the access here that
We
you do.
don't and we do, and yeah, it sometimes it's just surreal. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation we can have about that
Right.
topic.
Yeah. We do
And
that some other time.
well, that's a whole story in itself about our access to lakes here, and he said, but
Yeah.
it's not in the culture here. Like we said it earlier, in the States, it's in their it's the way they were raised, it's in their culture. But
Mhm.
fishing is part of who Americans essentially are a bit, and it's
Right.
almost like football. I mean, football is almost like a
Yeah.
religion down there, and
Yeah.
but here it's not. And yeah, but we can save that for another.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'd be here all night if we brought that topic up.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
want to thank you again. Appreciate you doing this. This is big. This is big. This is great. I hope that
Yeah.
a lot of guys will get to see this, and all the nation members and everyone will just, you know, stick
Yeah.
to it and
Thank you.
become part of it, because I think it's an important step. I don't think it needs to be overlooked, and it should be part of everyone's experience to learn through, through the club level and before they jump in the
Yeah.
deep end with yourself and other anglers in Ontario who are just so well versed and seasoned. You know.
Yeah. It's yeah. Thank you for having me. I love talking fishing, and I'll gladly come on and do anything with you ever again. And I encourage everybody to, you know, chase it, chase after it. Whether it's whatever your goals are, get after it. Life's short. You only live once, and you know, the classic was never a super goal for me, but it's the pinnacle of our sport, right? Like, I don't know if you, where is it? This picture on the wall here.
Yeah, right there.
That's day two of the classic. In my boat, holding a fish up, and you probably can't see very well, but there's a cameraman there filming the live, and I'll have that memory that with me forever.
Oh, that trophy back there too is not too bad either. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, yeah, my
Absolutely,
little memorabilia.
absolutely. Hey, great. Thanks again, Sean. And I'll probably see you at the Canadian Open.
Sounds good, man. Appreciate it.
All
Have a
right.
good night.
You too.